containers of codeine syrup worth about 9.8 billion naira at the on-air ports. This development comes less than 3 weeks after it seized more than 6,000 cartons of the same product contained at the Port Harcourt Port Complex on a River State. In a statement by the Director, Media and Advocacy, Femi Babafemi, the agency said the feat was achieved following credible intelligence and months of diligent tracking of the consignments from their port of departure. Other items in the container include 70 cartons of chili cutters and 55 cartons of Hyrograd tablets weighing 1,100 kilograms. To other matters now. After Thursday's agreement between the federal government and organized labor on the new minimum wage, President Bola Tinubu will now send an executive bill of 70,000 naira to the National Assembly for legislation before it becomes law. This was the outcome of a meeting between the president and leaders of the Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress inside the presidential villa. TVC News State House correspondent Femi Akonde reports.
3 months after the expiration of the previous national minimum wage, a new one has been agreed between the federal government and organized private sector. This new minimum wage of 70,000 naira comes 1 month after the 37-member tripartite committee inaugurated by President Bola Tinubu submitted its report. After meeting the president for the second time, an agreement was reached, and with a caveat of negotiating a wage increase every 3 years.
We are taking this well with mixed feeling because of the situation of the economy, but we have to move ahead. Despite the situation, and the negotiation can linger, coming from 62 to 70. And then with the promise that we'll come back soon.
We from organized labor, we have been pushing that the issue of 5 years review is too much, that a lot of economic indices may have changed. The next review will be 3 years, and after that pronouncement, we from labor, just has been said that, well, we have received what the president has promised.
Beyond the wage increase, President Bola Tinubu made some concessions on behalf of the federal government. He directed that all contentious issues with the Non-Academic Staff Union of Universities and the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities be resolved. The federal government will also expedite measures to reduce the impact of economic reforms on citizens.
More money is going to go into the acquisition of more buses, the CNG buses. Nigeria is going to be more CNG compliant, according to the president.
He promised and asked that the Minister of Finance, coordinating the economy and budget and the economic planning, should make sure that they go back to books, because he has the discretion to look into of NASS, ASU, and SANU and all that.
This meeting is also a victory for SANU and NASS after several years of fighting the federal government over unpaid salaries and arrears. But for the Nigerian workers, they will have to wait until this bill is passed by the National Assembly and transmitted back to President Bola Tinubu before they can all enjoy the pay rise. Femi Akonde, TVC News, Abuja.
Still on the new national minimum wage, the journey to a final agreement reached on Thursday now put an end to months of tumultuous negotiations. TVC News correspondent Joki Adisa takes us back to how the negotiations started. All right, we'll be speaking with the NLC General Secretary, but that will be after this break for more on this. But still ahead on the news at 1. Thanks for staying with us. Here is another look at our top stories. Nigerian Correctional Service releases identities of 31 inmates that escaped from the Suleja Custodial Center in April. NDLEA intercepts 9.8 billion naira worth of fresh codeine shipments from India. Outside Nigeria, global tech outage affects airlines, banks, and businesses worldwide. In sports, West Ham United indicate interest in signing former Chelsea midfielder N'Golo Kante. The journey to a final agreement on new national minimum wage reached on Thursday now puts an end to months of tumultuous negotiations. TVC News correspondent Joki Adisa takes us back to how the negotiations started.
The Minimum Wage Act of 2019, which made 30,000 naira the least pay for workers in Nigeria, expired in April 2024. By law, the act should be reviewed every 5 years to meet with contemporary economic demands of workers. The removal of subsidy in May 2023 led to a rise in cost of commodities, and transportation was not excluded. The citizens cried and organized labor threatened a showdown as it called for a review of the minimum wage. By January 2024, President Bola Tinubu inaugurated a 37-member tripartite committee to negotiate a new minimum wage for workers. The committee comprises representatives of federal government and states on one hand, as well as the private sector and organized labor on the other. It took a while before the committee began its sitting, and organized labor kicked. It accused government of buying time and exposing workers to hardship. The Trade Union Congress tabled 497,000 naira as minimum wage. On Wednesday, 15th May, the first major meeting on minimum wage ended in a stalemate as the workers rejected government's offer of 48,000 naira. A week after, on the 22nd of May, Labour turned down government's offer of 54,000 naira. Another deadlock on the 28th of May as the Nigeria Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress rejected government's 60,000 naira minimum wage. On June 3rd, both trade unions began a national strike over the tripartite committee's failure to agree on a new minimum wage and hike in electricity tariffs. President Bola Tinubu's commitment of a wage higher than 60,000 naira led to the suspension of the industrial action as organized labor returned to the negotiation table. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, George Akume, led the talks. On the 7th of June, the government and organized private sector agreed to 62,000 naira, while labor insisted on 250,000 naira. Nigerian workers, through their leaders, insisted on earning a living wage as against a slave wage. In the midst of these negotiations, state governors grumbled. The resolution of the tripartite committee moved all eyes to President Bola Tinubu, who was expected to send a bill to the National Assembly on a new wage. Desirous to avoid another stalemate, President Bola Tinubu engaged in further consultations with organized labor before the bill on a new wage is sent to the parliament. Thursday's agreement to 70,000 naira new minimum wage paves the way for the executive to dispatch the new minimum wage bill to the National Assembly.
Well, joining me for more on this is the General Secretary of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Emma Ogbuaja. Thank you for joining us at this time. Most times when Labour interfaces with government, leaders usually go back to the National Executive Council before agreeing a deal. We don't seem to be hearing much about that this time.
I actually had to leave a National Executive Council meeting that's ongoing now to attend to you because of the time of your program. So our meeting is on. We're making a review of what transpired yesterday.
All right, then. And there appears to be some contention with the idea of reviewing the minimum wage every 3 years. Some argue that it would simply drag on. What's the position of the NLC on this?
Most times some people talk out of ignorance and not appreciating what really should be. Outside the federal government, the industrial relations climate in Nigeria across sectors have a 2-year program period of negotiating wages and conditions of work in the different sectors, be it the manufacturing sector, be it the oil industry, textiles, construction, hotels. That is the standard industrial relation practice. It's very hurtful to everybody, the economy, the employer, and the populace, if you have to wait for 5 years for you to go fixing wages. So bringing it down, we were seeking even a 2-year period, which has become the norm in the private sector. But we reached a middle ground with the government of 3 years. And that is pretty decent in the circumstance.
All right. And the 70,000 naira, which was announced on Thursday, is actually 180,000 naira less than the 250,000 naira organized labor was advocating for as a living wage. Why did you agree on that?
The president, when he was campaigning, campaigned that he will bequeath to Nigerian workers a living wage. And we took him by his word. But there is a world of difference between a living wage and minimum wage. And when it became impossible for him to live up to his campaign promise, we have to refer back to trying to get a minimum wage that is reasonable for the country. So clearly, 70,000 is not a living wage. It will be putting the concept upside down to call that a living wage. It can go for minimum wage, and that is what we have gotten.
We expect this now to be sent to the National Assembly for legislation such that Nigerian workers, at least the least paid worker, begins to earn 70,000 naira as announced on Thursday. What, how do you react to that, and how do you see your members take this news going forward?
Clearly, it's something we say the struggle continues. You would have noted that in over the years, the challenge has always been in implementation. Now we've gotten the law. There are people that have not implemented the formal law till date. So it's going to be a struggle for us, and we're committed to that struggle. 70,000 is not the most ideal wage, but the minimum wage, what we're looking for is the least any person called a worker will get in our country. And if we move from that, there is nothing that says an employer cannot pay better. So we expect in the course of the consequential adjustments that people's wages will also be decently impacted. So we're looking forward to the National Assembly doing the right thing.
All right, then. General Secretary, Nigeria Labour Congress, Ima Ogbuaja, thank you for talking to us on TVC News at 1.
Thank you for having me.